Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. I'll give it another 30 seconds to a minute for attendees to even out, and then we will go ahead and get started. All right, Anna, I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome to the 2023 Better Building Summer Webinar Series. Next slide, please. Today's webinar will be focused on the home energy score, as well as building trust with homeowners and renters during remote quality assurance. My name is Megan Origilli-Plog. I'm with the U.S. Department of Energy, and I am a technology manager with the residential buildings team, and I help to manage the home energy score program. So our introduction, or our agenda for today is, again, a welcome and introduction, our speaker presentations. We'll have some time for Q&A and then a conclusion. In order to answer any of the polls, please go to slido.com and you can enter the event code #DOE. So the first poll today is, how familiar are you with home energy score? I'd like to get a baseline of where our audience is at, just to know, kind of what audience we have and what kind of depth I should go into in my introduction. You can also use the QR code on the screen to head to Slido and answer the poll. Give it a few more minutes to kind of even out. But it looks like we have a lot of folks that are partially familiar with it, and a fair amount that are not familiar with it at all. So I'm excited to introduce the Home Energy Score program to y'all. All right, let's dive into just our basics on the Home Energy Score program. Next slide, Anna. So our goal here is to build market value for home energy efficiency through standard data and metrics that are applicable to all existing homes. Again, this is for existing homes, not new build. And our target market, again, are existing single-family homes and townhomes. Soon we will be launching our manufactured homes portion of the Home Energy Score program, and kind of a soft launch / pilot program for multifamily. Again, our focus areas are consumer education, data aggregation, and real estate integration. So the Home Energy Score is essentially like a miles per gallon rating for your car. If you go to the lot, you look at your car, you say, oh, this has like a 20 miles per gallon rating, but that's not necessarily taking into account how you drive the car. And the Home Energy Score similarly does not take into account how the home is used. So this is an asset-based rating. You can see in the dashed box on that pyramid, everything that the Home Energy Score takes into account as an asset. So it doesn't matter if you have 2 people living in the home or 6, that score on a 1 to 10 scale will be the same based on the assets. And on the right-hand side, you see a sample score report. It will give you your score today, as well as a score with improvements. And the last page of the report lists any improvements that our tool generates. And all of those improvements have a combined payback period of 10 years or less. Next slide. So again, here are all of the things that our national labs have put together to create the home energy score tool and to build out those recommendations. And since we're talking a lot about quality assurance today, I just wanted to reiterate that home energy score at the DOE, we do require QA. So rescore of a random sample of homes needs to be done on at least 5% of homes. And that rescore is done by another qualified assessor. We have our QA and mentoring protocols online. And if you have any questions, there will be my email at the end. Sorry, I got distracted. And if so, for the QA, if there are any assessments that vary by 1 point on the 1 to 10 scale, we require a paper assessment or third assessment to explain the variation and explain the score. And partners are also expected to provide ongoing training to correct errors. Next slide. Just a quick overview of how many home energy scores we've had. As of last week, we have over 217,000 home energy scores that were produced by over 400 qualified assessors. And we have over 25 states with active assessors. And again, just a quick overview of our using home energy score in their state and local policies. I will say that under pending policies, the city of Bend should be moved over to real estate listings. That policy goes into effect on July 1st. And again, for home energy score, we really want to make sure that we are supporting our low-income residents because they face higher energy burdens and have greater potential to benefit from understanding home energy performance. Home energy score does allow low-income homeowners to realize resale benefits of a higher home value, and lenders can also link home energy score and recommendations to financing products to help homes improve. Next slide. And if you'd like to join our team of partners around the country, there is more information at homeenergyscore.gov or the Better Building Solutions Center.energy.gov/homeenergyscore. You can also email homeenergyscore@ee.doe.gov. Or you can email me. My email is at the end of this slide deck, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. All right, today's presenters, I am going to pull up our bios really quick. Give me just 2 seconds. I apologize for not having this open already. So first we have Jackie Susie Russell, who has worked in advocacy for nonprofit causes, residential energy efficiency, and solar. She has worked on successful political campaigns in both Oregon and Nevada and has conducted home energy scores on over 1,300 homes in the Portland area and is a certified sustainable homes professional. She enjoys working with people to foster a better understanding of the built environment and residential energy efficiency. Jackie holds a BA in psychology and environmental studies from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And on the weekends, you can find Jackie adventuring with her 3 pups or at pop-up makers markets selling her handmade soaps and hair care products. I will hand it over to Jackie now.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. All right. Good morning, everyone. We can go to the next slide. So my name is Jackie Susie Russell. I'm a residential energy consultant at Earth Advantage, and I work on the Home Energy Score team as a quality assurance provider for the Home Energy Score program here in Oregon and in the Bay Area. And today I'll be talking about the remote QA research and analysis Earth Advantage conducted and how we have since implemented protocols and procedures to ensure our remote systems operate smoothly. Before we get into any of that, though, just a little bit about Earth Advantage. So Earth Advantage is helping to create an informed and humane residential real estate marketplace that acknowledges both the climate impacts of housing and the impact climate change has on housing. We provide all home buyers and renters with access to sustainability-related information about a home. We support equitable housing outcomes, protecting those most vulnerable from the effects of climate change, and recognize both the personal and societal value that climate-friendly housing creates. All right, so we can get into some of the details here. So next slide. So in 2021, Earth Advantage participated in a study with PNNL to identify the feasibility, reliability, and accuracy of remote assessments. This study included identifying and testing different live stream or video applications such as FaceTime, Zoom, Google Meets, etc. We conducted a deep dive into the time-saving potential of on-site QAs versus photo documentation remote QAs versus live streaming applications, and cataloged a list of preferred applications based on performance and data storage capabilities. Next slide. So we conducted 26 remote assessments in 11 cities in New York and Oregon to ensure the homes evaluated represented a wide variety of both home configuration and characteristics throughout different climate zones. And we partnered with seasoned authorized assessors in each area to conduct a field assessment after the remote session was complete to measure the accuracy of the data collected remotely. We tested multiple types of streaming services to identify which were the most streamlined, cost-effective, and had the best user experience. And we included testing supplemental applications for uploading photos or videos if the connection was lost during the live stream or if the homeowner had additional documentation to provide. Next slide. In addition to the assessment itself, we evaluated homeowner and on-site assessor feedback about their experience with the remote assessment. So for me, actually, this research project was before I came over to Earth Advantage, and I was one of the assessor partners that conducted some of this research. So it was kind of cool to see it from both perspectives now. So we conducted a comparison of cost and time reducing strategies compared to the on-site assessment and QA. Through the process, we were able to identify barriers and challenges such as lack of access to stable internet connection in some of the more rural areas, or application performance when moving from a Wi-Fi connection to data connection. And this helped us pinpoint key features and minimum requirements to consider when choosing live stream applications. Next slide. So as you can see, we tested a lot of different streaming services, and we created this comparison of some of those key features that we identified during our research. You'll see at the very end there, we have GoForms on there. GoForms is our current photo and data collection application that we use for documenting our in-field QAs, as well as what some of our remote assessors use to submit their photo packets to us. And in my experience conducting the remote mentor sessions, especially FaceTime and Zoom are preferable for me, but there are obviously pros and cons to each one, which is what you can see here on this chart. Next slide. So some of our considerations when we utilized selecting the live streaming applications, as I just mentioned, my experience has mainly been with FaceTime and Zoom. I found FaceTime maintains its performance better when moving to areas of the home where the Wi-Fi signal isn't very strong, since it's better optimized to operate on a data signal. But the downside to FaceTime is you can't record the session, which is what I like about Zoom. So there's pros and cons to each. Some folks are more familiar with one application over another. So we found that it works best to just have a variety of tools in our belt that can best suit whichever client that we're working with. Next slide. Here we have a comparison of our current remote QA process, which includes assessors submitting a photo packet rather than live streaming the assessment. And I'll go through a little bit more about that in a bit. But the key takeaway here is the added time for taking photos and uploading the photos to the QA provider. So we did some digging into this time saving comparison. We do have a full chart in a white paper that we published that I think is in the resources slides at the end. That if anybody's interested, you can go back and read a little bit more in depth there. But with implementing the live stream option, if we can eventually get there, we estimate that it could reduce the assessor time by about 30% and would ease the lift of assessors needing to hold on to their documentation themselves, as we as the QA provider would have those records. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we currently do for our remote QA systems. So our current remote QA workflow is to have our assessors capture photos of all of their data points while out in the field. And this photo packet includes minimum 25-ish photos that essentially create like a virtual walkthrough. So we as the QA providers can get an accurate depiction of what's going on in the home. We ask for zoomed out photos of HVAC systems, water heating, and insulation, as well as some more close-up ones so that we can get the model numbers of any mechanical systems, and we can look at a close-up measurement of insulation depth. We also ask for photos of all sides of the exterior home and utilize real estate listing information as well as county records to ensure that we're getting the most information we can without having to actually be on site. Once the assessor has completed their assessment and sent the photos to us, we conduct our QA, our rescore QA as we normally would, and have them run their report in the DOE system. We do our comparison, and as long as everything is good to go, they can then create their compliant report from there. Next slide. And like with anything, there's pros and cons to our remote QA approach. It greatly reduces travel time for our QA providers. I personally have had instances driving out to the suburbs at rush hour, or if there's been an accident, and I sometimes can spend twice as much time just driving to and from the appointment as I actually do on site. We also have the added benefit of having photo documentation and records from our assessors should any disputes come up later on. It also helps our assessors QC their own work. I know from my own experience as an assessor, there would be some times that by the time I got back to my computer, I didn't remember every single detail, especially like if I had a fully booked day and just bouncing around from appointment to appointment. So it was really helpful for me to be able to review all of my photos once I got home to make sure that I had every single detail that I needed. On the con side, it does still require experienced field staff to be able to review the photo packets and supplemental information to get the whole picture. And we'll always have folks that push back on the additional time to their on-site appointments to account for taking photos and uploading them later on. And it does require some additional training time on our end as the QA provider to ensure that folks are utilizing systems correctly. But if we're able to utilize the live stream option for remote QAs, we feel that this would help alleviate any resistance to the added time of taking photos and submitting or storing them, as we'd be able to hold on to that information. And we do use a variety of different ways for assessors to send us their remote QA packets. And some of these systems do require additional cost and software development time in order to integrate them into our current systems. Next slide. So here's a couple of examples of how we're collecting remote information from our assessors. This one here is GoForms, which is a custom form building application that both collects data, photos, and integrates with our CRMs for tracking purposes. So we utilize GoForms not only for our remote folks to submit their remote QAs, but as our data collection tool as the QA provider. So this way, if I am out doing a QA and then I'm out on vacation or something, one of my colleagues can easily pull this up and not only see all my notes, measurements, calculations, everything like that, but that every single photo. So they get, again, that like basically like virtual walkthrough, so they can answer any questions if the assessor comes back with issues. What I like best about GoForms is that we can see each data input, as well as for our assessors that utilize it, how they're calculating out those average R values, which I feel like is one of the more difficult ones. We also have the photo fields set to required, so it ensures that the assessor is collecting all of the necessary information. And really the biggest downside, I think, to GoForms is the cost, since there is an additional cost per user. So we have currently limited our GoForms users to just our assessors that are outside of our field operation region, which is the PDX metro area. Next slide. And since we've had to limit our GoForms users, we have found other ways for our assessors to utilize our remote QA option. This is an example of just a photo packet that was sent to us via email. We also accept them via text or Google Drive link or zip files, however, Dropbox, however people want to send them in. We provided our assessors with the required photo list if they're not using GoForms, and ask that they send any notes or other supplemental documentation. Next slide. Another remote tool that we use is our new database system called Home Energy Fit. We developed HEFIT as part of our contract with BayREN, which is the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, which we are the program implementers for their Home Energy Score program. Our BayREN assessors submit a photo packet for every single assessment they do, which we conduct a 5-minute desktop review of. So we're looking at every single one that's being submitted, in addition to conducting the full rescore QAs, utilizing these photo submittals to reach our QA goals. Since taking over at the beginning of the year, being able to review every submittal has really actually been helpful for us, being the new program implementer, to identify any gaps in knowledge and be able to work with our assessors to train them and improve the quality of their assessments and ensure the homeowners are getting the most accurate information from their score. Next slide. This is a comparison chart of the remote assessment versus the on-site score. So this came from our previous research, which again, you can read more about this in the white paper that we published. But as you can see, our research was pretty successful in proving that remote assessments are pretty spot on to what we see in the field. So just like when we go out for in-field QAs, as long as we're within that 1 point difference, which is what we were finding in our remote research data, that we're really getting everything that we need, even from the remote ones. Next slide. After the conclusion of our research, the DOE added the option for us to utilize the live stream application for mentor sessions for new assessors. We previously were allowed to collect photo packets from new assessors to complete their mentor sessions. But personally, I think the live stream option is much more helpful. This gives us the opportunity to talk through the details with the trainee and allows for them to ask questions specific to the home that we're conducting the assessment on, or just general HES protocol. I feel that it's been really similar to the experience as when we conduct in-person mentoring sessions. And we've been utilizing this option recently as the city of Bend passed their ordinance, which goes into effect on Saturday. So we've been onboarding a lot of new folks there, and the remote live stream option for the mentor sessions has been really great. And since we don't have HES staff in that area, we've been able to utilize this, and we've onboarded over 10 new assessors in preparation for the launch. And I think it's been awesome. We really get that like face-to-face time with them. We can go over, I've even been able to screen share with folks of like, here's how you log into the DOE system. Here's how you enter in data if they're unfamiliar, and really kind of pinpoint. Some people need a little bit more support with just that, software application. Some folks are brand new to the industry. So it really gives us that same opportunity as if we were in person. Next slide. And lastly, we have implemented a new protocol for assessors when a home is being rescored. We require assessors to take a photo set and submit for a remote QA, and this helps us understand trends in the housing market. So for example, at least here in Portland, we're seeing a huge uptick in homes being rescored because they've added air conditioning since the initial assessment. And it also helps us identify if there's any common trends and errors that need correction based on the new score, so we can better support our assessor community, which also helps us reach our QA goals overall. And next slide. And that's it for me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jackie. A quick reminder to our audience to send in any questions that you have to slido.com with the event code #DOE. We look forward to answering your questions at the end of the session. And now we will hear from our next speaker, Edward. Edward Louis joined PNNL in June of 2020 and is now a building energy efficiency research engineer, improving people's lives and making the world a better place through energy efficient buildings. Edward has spent the last few years examining how energy efficient products and technologies perform in the real world and noting new issues that arise from increasing energy efficiency. His experience include assessing, verifying, and quantifying the energy performance of over 600 new homes seeking above code energy efficiency certifications in the greater Portland and Southwest Washington area. Edward's academic background consists of a bachelor's degree in civil engineering and a master's degree in energy and environmental policy. Take it away, Edward.
Super. Thank you, Megan. Next slide, please. So today I want to present to you work we've been doing about quality installation documentation and how that connects with building trust of homeowners and renters. Next slide, please. So the presentation will do an overview of how other industry do this process. We will look into how consumers are perhaps correct to not necessarily trust the professionals. We'll look into the importance of quality. We'll look into the current methods of keeping contractors and the industry honest. And then we'll look into the quality installation documentation workflows that we've created and why they're better. And then we'll showcase some examples, and we'll look into the current interest levels. And you can also join the programs and contractors that are interested in working to test out our workflows, and then we'll jump to some conclusions. Next slide. So, and a good example of quality installation is documentation that you get when you get your car inspected and oil changes at a car dealership, for example. You typically get reports such as the ones shown in the slide, and these reports are not necessarily always reviewed by someone else. So the QA, QC aspect of the report is not always there, but every single vehicle that comes through gets documentation and gets tests done on it. And so then as the consumer, you have a report proving that they did the work that you paid them to do, and that they did check your vehicle, and that it's not like the data from somebody else's vehicle is used in aggregate to describe your vehicle. There's this data specific to your vehicle. And so this type of documentation works really well. And we want similar types of documentation in the construction industry and retrofit work that's being done in people's homes. And how do we do that? Next slide, please. Yeah, yep, keep going. And in the world of HVAC installation, Windows upgrades, there are certainly some contractors out there that are really out there to make a fast buck and scam consumers. These types of scams abound not just in the world of construction, in the construction industry. They're in every single industry, from locksmiths to lawn care to oil change facilities. So there is a mix of this, but then there's also a mix of companies and contractors who are just not utilizing good practices and techniques to execute the work for the consumer. And so we also want to solve the trust problem, reduce scams, and also disseminate best practices across contractors to level the playing field. Next slide. And so why is it really important that, from contractor A to contractor B to contractor C, that, they all execute quality in a similar way? Well, it's because the quality of installation in equipment for the home, it makes a huge difference in the actual real world efficiency and performance that you get. Energy Star has done assessments, and they've come to the conclusion that nearly half of all HVAC systems are incorrectly installed in some way. And so what is the impact of these incorrect installs on real world comforts and real world efficiency? Well, it's quite significant. One research paper found that installation faults in the world of HVAC results in 20.7 terawatt hours of additional energy use, which represents about a 9% increase in utility bills. That's absolutely humongous. And we can solve this by documenting quality, and then also by using the workflows for documenting quality, level the playing field and encourage the same level of quality installation regardless of which contractor you select. And then also with newer technologies like heat pump water heaters, the requirements and the knowledge base on what constitutes a quality installation is a little bit different. And we want to help use quality installation documentation workflows to bring everybody to the same knowledge base about these new technologies and that bring about new requirements. For example, heat pump water heaters have air volume requirements. So traditionally, if you had an electric resistance water heater, installing a water heater in a closet, a small closet full of seasonal supplies would be fine. But with a heat pump water heater, they need a certain amount of air volume in order to collect the heat from that air volume in order to efficiently heat the cold water into hot water. And so if you install in a small room that's not big enough, then you get reduced performance, reduced real world hot water delivery and efficiency. And then if you backfill it with seasonal supplies, that room gets even smaller. And that's a bit of a problem. And so this is the type of thing that, the quality installation can help inform the contractor and inform the customer about the new technologies and how it needs to be used in a slightly different way. Next slide. So currently, when you get a furnace installed or a new water heater installed under an energy efficiency program, typically how that works is the program has a quality assurance or quality control implementing organization. One of those organizations, for example, might be Earth Advantage. And so there are many of these types of organizations across the US that provide this type of service to an energy efficiency program. And they typically do in-person assessments on a certain percentage of a contractor's work. And that percentage is typically around 5%. Some programs do a much higher level of in-person QA, but 5% is fairly typical. And so if you're the homeowner that gets selected as one of the addresses for QA, then yeah, you have a second set of eyes to check the work to make sure that the contractor installed everything correctly. But if you're not selected, then Well, we just hope that, that the contractor installed things correctly, because there is not a second set of eyes. Um, so that's one of the cons of this system. But in addition, as my previous presenter mentioned, it is expensive to drive around town to inspect homes, and you sit in traffic. It's not very efficient use of time. And it's also inconvenient for the customer, who has to schedule, after the contractor is all done, this additional time for the QA inspector to come and take a look at things. So that's an additional inconvenience for the customer. And in some cases, for example, like insulation in the attic, you can see the insulation details afterwards, but you may not be able to see the air sealing details that are underneath all the insulation anymore. And so some of those details are very difficult to inspect after the fact. And so they're not inspected very well, even with a high quality QA, QC inspector. So those are some of the cons of the current methodology. We'll go to the next slide. Another way that energy efficiency programs do quality assurance is to ask contractors to utilize checklists. Well, some of these checklists are kind of difficult to fill out on a phone, as you could imagine. A checklist that's laid out like this. If you look at it on a smartphone, the boxes to check are awfully small on a smartphone screen, and you have to pinch zoom in order to try to check those boxes. While you're in a hot attic, it's a little bit difficult to do. And then while you check these boxes, you don't have a photo to actually document whether something was installed to a certain level of quality. At most you can do is say that it was done. And customers also don't always understand what these checklist items are, and they also don't have a photo to understand the context of whether this was done to a level of quality or not. So that's another method that's currently utilized, and some of the shortcomings. Next slide. And so the method that PNL and DOE is working to roll out and implement is a photo-driven quality documentation workflow, where the vast majority of the work is for the contractor to take photos, and they get photo prompts describing to them what photos to take. And the intent is to make this so that it's easier for the contractor to document their work. It's easy for a energy efficiency programs QA or QC implementer to review those photos. And then also the system is set up so that it automatically generates presentable reports, so that there's no need to do office work afterwards to click and drag photos and to create reports. It's automatically done. And so then the customer gets emailed a report, kind of like how car dealerships, they don't pull together those photos after the fact. No, they do that. Their iPad system automatically creates those reports for the customer, and so does this system. And the intent is so that contractors and future contractors coming back to provide service to the home have this documentation to look at. It helps ensure that the contractor leaves, documents the condition of the home when they leave, so that if there's any claims that they did not do a good job, they can say, well, when I left the house, it was at this quality. So if it's different afterwards, then it wasn't my doing. The customer gets documentation, photo documentation that the work was done correctly. It makes it easy for a QA QC implementer to review the photos. And then if there's additional folks that want to review those photos, it's easy to transmit this PDF report. For example, if somebody in a rebate department is interested in reviewing the photos before issuing a rebate, they can do that. We encourage homeowners to keep a record of these reports, save it onto their computer, save a printed copy, so that when they sell the home, that a real estate appraiser can look at these quality installation documentation reports and use that in their appraisal of the home. And so that's the gist of the workflow. And we'll go to the next slide. And so additional reasons why it's better is that this levels the playing field for contractors. Everybody participating in this rebates, whether it be the Inflation Reduction Act or other energy efficiency programs, they all need to do the same test and the same documentation. And so then there's not a competition among contractors. The ones that are not documenting, that save 10 minutes at every job, they're able to charge a lower rate than a contractor B who spends the 10 minutes to document and generate these reports, and therefore he or she has to charge a slightly elevated rate for the cost of the documentation. No, like we're very interested in the concept of leveling the playing field. Consumers can learn ahead of time, looking at the requirements, what the critical details are for the retrofit they're interested in. And just like, not every report from an oil change at the car dealership gets reviewed by somebody, there is still 100% documentation of the critical details of every job, even if a program chooses to only sample 5% or 10% of those quality installation reports. There is still 100% of the jobs have a report. Consumers really like getting a report that shows the work that they paid for was done to a high level of quality, and it also standardizes the photos that are taken from job to job, and so that's really good too. And and we're interested in getting programs across the US to adopt these workflows, and so that standardizes best practices not only across contractors in one region, but it standardizes things across the country as well. Next slide. So here's an example of some of the photos for a ductless heat pump installation. And when we receive photos, we can also help contractors improve their processes for performing tests that are necessary to ensure quality when installing equipment. For example, doing vacuum decay testing is really important when installing heat pumps. And one of the best practices is to eliminate the hoses from a manifold gauge from the system when you're doing a vacuum decay test, and instead utilize a micron gauge that does not have any rubber hoses in the system, so that you're measuring the vacuum of the system only. And this is something that we can review in the photos and utilize the photos as a teaching tool to help contractors learn better practices if they're not already implementing the best practices. Next slide. And so we've gotten quite a bit of interest in the photo documentation workflows from both private software companies that are wanting to add the photo prompts to their software. And then we've also received great interest from programs to test the photo documentation workflows in their pilots. And we would love if anyone at this call is in a position to also be interested in testing some of these workflows, whether they be for envelope upgrades or heat pump water heater installs, or heat pump both ducted and ductless heat pump installations. We have a wide menu of documentation workflows developed, and we're getting them all to a state where they are ready to be used in the field. Next slide. And so the conclusion is, like, as a customer, we all want, when we pay for somebody to come to our home to install equipment or to upgrade our home so that it's more energy efficient, more comfortable, we don't want to get screwed in that process. And one of the ways that we can ensure that that does not happen is to have a standardized quality installation documentation workflow that the contractor uses and that the customer gets the reports. And it's quite rare that you end up with a contractor that's truly interested in cheating or being deceitful and trying to make a fast buck. They do exist out there, but that's more of the exception than the norm. More often than not, what happens is that not everybody has learned the best practices, and so as a result, if you choose a contractor that does not know all the best practices, you may not necessarily get the highest quality work possible. And so we are also really interested through the quality installation documentation workflow to disseminate those best practices, whether it be in insulation upgrades or heat pump water heater installs or heat pump installations. And that's all. Next slide. Feel free to contact me at this email address, edward.louie@pnnl.gov, if you're interested in the workflows and trying them out in a retrofit job of your own.
Thank you, Edward and Jackie, for your very informative and insightful presentations. Before we transition to Q&A, I wanted to encourage all of our attendees to download the additional resources handout that's shared in the Zoom chat box. The handout contains links to resources from Better Buildings and our speakers on today's topic, and we hope that you find this useful. Again, you can find home energy score information on the Better Buildings website as well. Right, now to move on to Q&A. So if you haven't already, please join us over at Slido. And with the event code again, DOE, to submit and upvote questions. All right, so let's get into this. For Edward and Jackie, is it possible to build an equipment retirement program built off this photo-driven QA/QC process? For example, image to text recognition of model number and date of installation. The homeowner could get updates for rebates and planned retirement. I think that's for you, Edward.
Yeah, certainly. I think this is all possible. Everything, has a certain cost associated with building the software and the technologies to do this type of work. Certainly, one of the great things about technology is the cost of computing is basically dropped to zero. And so once it gets coded, it really doesn't, we're not living in a world short of compute power to be able to do like photo text recognition or to provide a update to the homeowners on when they might need to replace their equipment or get it serviced for cleaning, or whether any rebates are attached to that piece of equipment. So it all can certainly be done. It's a matter of getting that scope placed into a proposal and then getting funding to make it happen.
Thank you, Edward. All right, another that has a lot of upvotes. So please do a follow-up webinar on home energy score basics. I would be very happy to do that. It might not be through the summer webinar series, but I will be sure to send any invite out to the Better Buildings Residential Network via my colleague, Jonathan. And a question for Jackie. Could you discuss the remote mentor sessions more in depth? What's the process to get involved and what does the timeline look like?
Yeah. So the remote mentor sessions are the same as our in-person ones, just over like Zoom or FaceTime. So these are for our new assessors that they have had their qualifying credential verified and then gone through the DOE simulation training. So this is their last step before they become a real assessor. And we go out on site with them or over Zoom or FaceTime to conduct an actual assessment. So we, as the mentors, are creating that initial assessment, and then the trainees are creating a mentor score. And so we walk through everything we would do in a normal assessment with the trainee so that they can, if they're new to the industry, they can learn just a little bit more about what they're looking at, and, you know, little tips and tricks of like, oh, this is, you know, this is an easy way, like I like to measure versus, you know, going around room by room with a tape measure or something. And then we, similarly to our QAs, once they input their data and we input ours, we do a comparison to make sure that everything is in alignment. And as long as everything is good to go, they then become an authorized assessor. The timeline, it really depends on the trainee. The mentor session itself doesn't really take that long. It's you know, the same as a normal assessment, maybe a little bit extra time just if you're working through any questions and explanations with the person. So, you know, maybe like at most 2-ish hours. I do find that the remote ones are a little bit on the longer side, just because I might need someone to be like, you know, just like, oh, hold there for a second while I take a screenshot or make a note of a model number or something like that. But the timeline for like becoming a fully authorized assessor is really up to the individual person. We've had people that can get through it in, you know, like a week or two. And we have some people that just because of other obligations work through it pretty slowly, and, you know, like 6 months until they're an authorized assessor. So that's very dependent on the person.
Thank you, Jackie. All right, next question. Are there photo workflows for conducting combustion safety testing when doing envelope upgrades or air sealing?
Yes, we have that. So yes, that is one of the workflows that we've developed. And because there is such a variety of combustion safety testing equipment, ranging from ones that were manufactured 10 years ago to the latest generation that are, you know, Bluetooth connected, we like the photo documentation process, because you can take a photo of your equipment and not necessarily need to buy new equipment that is Bluetooth enabled. But we do have a workflow for documenting those combustion safety tests.
Thank you, Edward. And Jackie, I don't know if you want to tackle this next one from Tom, but how does Home Energy Score deal with infiltration, since you are an assessor yourself?
Yeah, so it estimates air leakage off of the year built that we input, because all of the national labs did very rigorous testing on different decades of air infiltration based off of year built. We do have the option to add in the diagnostics of blower door and duct blaster, but it's not a required field. So we found, you know, not a lot of folks utilize that option, at least here in the PDX region, because our HES program is tied to the time of listing. So trying to get people in and out as quickly as possible and keep that cost low. So adding in those diagnostics increases both of those. But we have found in the Bay Area, there are a lot of HERS raters that are also doing home energy scores. So because they're running those diagnostics already, they oftentimes input those into their data. So yeah, it depends. Like we use the year built if we're not running those diagnostics, but we can add that in as well.
And Tom, following up on that, we also, as I alluded to, the quality installation documentation reports, the desire is for it to live with the home and for the customer to be able to pull those up and be able to share with, for example, a home energy score assessor, so that, you know, during the process of upgrading to a heat pump, if it's a ducted system, there's requirements for duct leakage testing. And so those values are in those reports, and then a home energy score assessor can just look up the photo and be able to see those values and then input that into the home energy score. The same goes with for attic air sealing and insulation upgrades. There's photo requirements for test in, test out for air leakage reductions. And you know, the final blower door results can be used to be a data entry point for home energy scores. So the tools all kind of like mesh with one another, and that's that was not by accident. We really like that idea.
Thank you guys both. I think we have time for one more question, and I'll just do the next one in line. As a Better Buildings member, can we perform self-assessments on our homes, looking to understand the software and how it works? Is there a similar resource for commercial buildings?
Actually, Megan, maybe this one is better for you to talk about, because there's now the test feature, right?
Are you talking about the app?
Yeah, where folks, like, even if they're not an authorized assessor, they can like see what the data inputs look like. They can kind of input stuff on their own home, but it's not an official one.
Yes, so you can get to our guest access API to kind of play around and see, you know, if you can input all of the scores. You could probably generate an unofficial score for yourself. And if you are an iPhone user, you could also look at the Remotely app, which is a new app that has been developed to use augmented reality to create an unofficial home energy score. And they're still testing that one out, so I don't know how widely that is available, but our guest access API is something that I will drop into the chat in just a little bit. And by in a little bit, I mean one quick second. Okay, great. Got it here. All right, after I post this in the chat, I think we will go ahead and move on. But I just want to thank everyone for your questions, to our panelists, and for our panelists and their great responses. As mentioned before, this webinar is part of the 2023 Better Buildings Summer Webinar Series. And as you can see, we have a great lineup of presentations through August. You can visit the Better Buildings Solution Center to learn more and register today. And we hope that you will join us on July 6th for our next webinar entitled "It Takes a Village: Building a Culture of Energy Efficiency in Your Facilities." Join this webinar to learn about the creative ways that Better Buildings or Better Plants partners are encouraging employee engagement to make progress on their energy and emissions goals. With that, I would like to thank our panelists very much again to taking the time to be with us today, especially since y'all are on Pacific time and it's 9 a.m. there. Feel free to contact our presenters directly with additional questions, or if we couldn't get to your question during the Q&A period. And if you'd like to send those to me directly, I could compile for Edward and Jackie as well. And again, I encourage you to follow the Better Buildings Initiative on LinkedIn and Twitter for the latest news. And you can find our handles by their respective icons on the left-hand side of the slide. You'll receive an email notice when today's recording, slides, and transcript are available on the Better Buildings Solution Center. Thanks, everyone.